In Python programming, indentation is not a matter of style but a fundamental aspect of the language's syntax. Most programming languages like C, C++, and Java uses braces to define a block of code. Python uses indentation to define the structure of code blocks, making it unique among programming languages. In Python, code block that belongs to functions, loops, if statements, match cases, etc. are indented. In Python, indentation refers to the spacing at the beginning of a line of code that determines its grouping and hierarchy within the program's structure. The primary purpose of indentation in Python is to define the scope of statements such as those within loops, conditionals, functions, and classes. All statements within the same distance to the left belong to the same block of code. If a block must be more deeply nested, it is simply indented further to the left. Indentation is how far the first letter or symbol on a line is from the start of the line. Here, first line is not indented, second line level 2 is indented 4 spaces, and third line level 3 8 spaces. The rule to indent is easy. After any statement that ends with a colon, indent the lines which are part of the block by X number of spaces. Indentation gives Python context for block structured instructions. It tells how many of the following lines the keyword applies to. For example, after if x equal to 1, you must indent all the code that is supposed to be nested under that if statement by +1 space more than the if statement itself. The code that comes after the if statement should be on the same indentation as the if statement. Rules of indentation in Python. Use spaces for indentation. Python by default uses 4 spaces for each level of indentation. You can use any number of spaces. While you can technically use tabs, it's recommended to use spaces for consistency and to avoid issues with different editors and environments. Consistent indentation. Maintain consistent indentation throughout your code. Mixing spaces and tabs or using different numbers of spaces for indentation can lead to indentation errors. Here is an example of Python indentation. In if, for, while, and function definitions, a colon is used to indicate the start of an indented block. Notice the colon after the if statement. Here, print positive number and print negative number are two distinct code blocks of if-else statement. These are indented with 4 spaces. The final statement is not indented, so it is not part of else block. Now run the code. Since 5 is a positive number, the if block is executed and positive number is printed. Then the last print statement is printed. This example has only single statement for a block. If you have multiple statements in a block, make sure all the lines are indented with same number of spaces. For example, here if block has 4 lines, all the lines should be indented with the same number of spaces. Multi-level indentation. We can nest control statements and loops inside a function and inside one another. In such cases, we must use multi-level indentation. All lines within the same block should have the same level of indentation. The best practice is to use 4 spaces for the first indentation and then keep adding additional 4 spaces to increase the indentation. This tells the program what code still belongs to a specific block. For example, here we have an odd-even function which prints if the number is even or odd. Here the first level of indentation is odd-even function statements and indented 4 spaces. Second level of indentation is the while block and indented 8 spaces. Third level is the if-else block and indented 12 spaces. In Python, you must indent each line of code by the same amount of spaces to indicate a block of code. The while loop's if-else statement and I equal to I+1 lines of code are indented 8 spaces. The print odd even done statement is indented 4 spaces. It is part of the function block. It gets printed only if the odd even function is called. The last print statement is not indented. It is not part of the function. Run the code. Last two print statements are printed. Comment the call to the odd even function. Now run the program. Only the last line is printed. You must be very careful with indentation. A simple mistake may give unwanted results. The line I equal to I plus 1 should be indented 8 spaces to be part of while block. By mistake, if that is indented 4 spaces, it will not be a part of the while block and I will never be incremented and we will end up with a infinite loop. Run this code. Since I is never incremented, it will become an infinite loop. Indentation errors are common in Python, but they can be easily resolved by carefully checking and adjusting the indentation of your code. An indentation error is a compile time error that occurs when tabs or spaces in a code do not follow expected patterns. This is typically a syntax error. Let's look at some common indentation errors and how to fix them. First line indentation. Indentation is not permitted on the first line of Python code. For example, indent the first line x equal to 5 with one space. Now run the code. You will get an unexpected indentation error. Inconsistent indentation. Ensure that all lines within the same block have the same level of indentation. If the code contains a mix of spaces and tabs, convert them to spaces. If a block contains unevenly indented code, for example 2 spaces before one line and 4 spaces before another, this confuses the interpreter and results in an indentation error. Therefore, it is important to ensure that all statements in each block are indented with the same number of spaces. For example, the code lines inside the if block have different indentation levels. The second line of code has more spaces at the beginning than the one before it, but the one before it does not begin a subblock. In a block, all lines of code must begin with the same number of spaces. Now run this code. You will get an unexpected indent error. Mismatched indentation. This can happen when unindent of a line does not correspond to any of the outer indentation levels. This highlighted line of code contains less spaces at the beginning than the previous one, but it also does not match any other block. Run this code and unindent does not match any outer indentation level error is displayed. Missing indentation. If there is no indented block where it is expected, you will get this error. There are two main reasons to get this error. No indented block. In this example, there is a colon without an indented block. Run the code. The error states that you need to have an indented block on line 4 after the if statement. Unindented block. The line of code after the colon begins with the same number of spaces as the previous one. Run the code. The error states that you need to have an indented block on line 4 after the if statement. Unexpected indent. This error is displayed if the code encounters an unexpected indent. It is important to indent blocks, but only blocks that should be indented. Here we have an indented block without a colon before it. Run the code. Unexpected indent error is displayed. The error states that it wasn't expecting an indent. Fixing indentation errors. Indentation errors are common in Python, especially for beginners, but they can be easily resolved by carefully checking and adjusting the indentation of your code. To fix an indentation error in Python, you will need to adjust the spaces or tabs to ensure that the code follows the rules. For example, here remove the indentation on line 2. Now when you run the code, there are no errors. These are a few advantages of indentation in Python. Indentation enhances readability by indicating a clear hierarchy. Indentation reduces the amount of syntax required to define code blocks, which makes Python code shorter and easier to read. No curly braces, commonly used in many programming languages, means fewer chances of misplacing or mismatching them, which reduces syntax errors. These are a few disadvantages of indentation. Python's use of indentation can limit the flexibility of code formatting as all code blocks must follow a consistent indentation level. Changes to the indentation levels may cause unintended consequences that may be difficult to diagnose and fix, which cause maintenance issues. If code is copied and pasted from one editor to another, the indentation levels may not be preserved and can cause errors. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel.